should triggering Article 50 come down to a House of Commons vote, how would the Labour Party be instructed to vote under your respective leaderships? Jeremy.
Article 50 will be triggered or not by the government when they decide they want to do it. There will presumably be a House of Commons vote at that time. We have to recognise the fact there has been a referendum. It didn't give us the result that we wanted. I think we have to set down lines for negotiation which are about protecting workers' rights, that are about protecting consumer rights, environmental rights, that are ensuring that industries all across Britain have access to European markets, and also that financial services have access to European markets. There has to be an effective economic relationship with Europe when the Brexit negotiations are finally completed. And I am talking to socialist parties across Europe and also learning a great deal from the Norwegian experience on this. We have to have an effective relationship with Europe. We also have to recognise there was a referendum that took place. Didn't deliver what we wanted, but that was the result it gave.
Owen, if you were leader, how would your MPs be told to vote?
Well, I don't think that's good enough. I was absolutely gutted when we woke up leaving the European Union. I think it will make lives immeasurably harder for working people here in Scotland and across Britain. And I think it is wrong for Britain to be outside the European Union. We should be in it, taking the fight to the European Union, making sure that our values are spoken for, making sure we use the Union to solve lots of the issues we want to solve. Tax avoidance, social issues. And I would use absolutely every vehicle possible in order to do that, including voting in Parliament not to trigger Article 50. So if I were the leader of the Labour Party, we would seek to block Article 50 being triggered. We were lied to on Brexit. We need to know what the truth of it is. And under my leadership, we would be strong and we would be staying in the European Union.
Thank you. Can I just repeat my point from the beginning that I would appreciate it if people aren't shouting out. You're shouting out democracy. Democracy would be served. We could hear what these gentlemen would say. Jeremy, would you like to come back on any of that?
Well, a referendum took place. It delivered a result, and when you like the result of a referendum, you can be pleased. When you don't like the result of the referendum, you have to work out the best thing to do. But if you just say, well, sorry, didn't like that result, you'll have to do it all over again. We had the debate, we had the referendum, it gave a result. There may be lots of reasons why people voted to leave. I have set down what I think are important parameters, important lines that we have to defend for our future. We don't want to become a sort of low-wage, tax haven, bargain basement economy off the shores of Europe. Surely we want to be an investment economy with high-quality public services and an inclusive approach to social policy. That we can achieve. We have to ensure we have an effective economic relationship with Europe, and we have to oppose the whole very notion of the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership and what it would do to jobs and services and democracy in Britain.
You see, the reason I think Jeremy can be so complacent and passive about this and simply say, oh, the referendum took place, is he's happy with the result. He's not bothered about the result. You know, and his record speaks loud and clear. Loud and clear. One of the things he was attacking John Smith for in 1992 was Europe, because Jeremy didn't agree then with being part of what he used to call a federal Europe, and he still doesn't agree with us being part of a federal Europe. And the truth is, of course, that Jeremy is quite content now for us to sit back and for that hard Brexit that Liam Fox and David Davis and Theresa May are going to introduce to take place. And I say to him, if he's so concerned about protecting workers' rights, why on earth would we allow the Tories to implement a Brexit deal that is going to see workers' rights sold down the river in this country? If we're so keen to protect the NHS from interference and competition from commercial operators in this country and overseas, as Jeremy and I are, why on earth would we walk out of Europe knowing that the Tories will implement those changes and open up our NHS as the price of Brexit? None of us can be complacent about that. It is going to make life harder for working people, and we've got to fight a lot harder. Jeremy didn't fight hard last time round. I will.
In 1972, there wasn't the social Europe that later developed. It was then a common market.
I was talking
There
about
was
1992.
and is and continues to be a debate in Europe and the economic direction it would go. There are those in Europe that want there are those in Europe who want a free market Europe. There are those in Europe that want to there are those in Europe who want to privatise everything, and there are those of us in this country and across Europe who want to see a social Europe, want to see social justice across Europe, and want to protect workers' rights, consumer rights, and environmental rights.
Can you stop shouting, please?
And that is exactly
Jeremy, can I stop
what
you for
I
a moment,
campaigned
please?
on in the referendum, and it's exactly what the lines are I've set down as to how we would deal with the Brexit negotiations and how we would set that down. I want to see, as I'm sure you do, workers' protection, consumer protection, environmental protection, trade and market access to Europe.
I want to see all those things too, Jeremy, but all of those
Then
things
we're agreed.
are better achieved within the European Union. All of those things are better protected within the European Union. Workers' rights will be better protected. Social justice will be better guaranteed. Environmental protections are better protected. And we, unfortunately, are sleepwalking now and allowing the Tories to get towards the Brexit door without even putting up a fight. We're going out with a whimper right now. And I don't think you should be as complacent as you are. I think you should be much, much tougher. But I also think I don't want people jeering at Jeremy. I think he should have told the people who've been jeering me tonight to keep quiet. And I think I want the people who are jeering Jeremy to keep quiet.
And I think I'd agree with that, part of that. As I said before, this is being live streamed, so people can't hear if you guys are shouting over it, so I'd appreciate it if you would keep it to respectful applause, because we're going to stick with Europe. So, under you, would remaining or re-entering the European Union be in Labour's manifesto? And that starts with you, Owen.
Yes. I think the way in which we should approach this now is we should demand that Labour has a seat at the table during the Brexit negotiations. 9 million people voted Labour in the last election. 70% of those voted to stay in. The Labour Party fought incredibly hard, most of us at least, in order to stay within the European Union. And I think that we should be saying to Theresa May, I want a Brexit minister, a Labour one, who's going to sit alongside yours. This is bigger than politics. And at the end of the Brexit negotiations, if we know they are selling down the river workers' rights and destroying social protections, and they will do, we all know that they will do, then we should have the courage to say to the British people, this is not what you thought you were getting. It's less money for public services, not more, and we will have the courage to put it back to the British people, to rubber stamp or to reject Brexit, either at a second referendum or in a manifesto at a general election.
An election manifesto must be decided by the party and what's going to be in it. An election manifesto has to, obviously, try to protect the working conditions that we've already talked about and agree upon. A manifesto has to put that quite clearly there. We've also got to recognise that whilst across the whole of the UK, 2/3 of Labour voters voted to remain, 1/3 didn't, it wasn't evenly spread. There are some parts, Labour-held constituencies, strong Labour areas, where there was a very big vote to leave the EU. We've got to win those people back. We've got to win them back on a policy of investment, on a policy of job protection, and a policy of saying we're not going to allow left behind Britain to exist any longer. We're going to invest in all parts of Britain.
Can I just come back to you on that? That didn't sound like you were ruling it out going into a general election manifesto.
We'll go into a general election with a manifesto that I hope will say we're going to have a positive relationship with Europe in the future. If we're going to go into an election saying, well, there was a referendum, we didn't like the result, therefore we're going to ignore it, I don't think that says very much. I don't think it says very much for our respect for democracy and the decision that was taken. I didn't want this result any more than anybody else, I suspect, in this hall wanted that result, but we have to work with it. We have to do our best to ensure we get the protections we need, the market access we need, the relationship we need with the European Union.
You see, Lindsay, I think that was an incredibly revelatory answer from Jeremy. Because what he's just said is that even if the Brexit deal that is on offer in 18 months or 2 years or 3 years' time at the next general election is worse for the British people, Jeremy is not going to put into a manifesto that we should reject it and act to stay within the European Union. That is an incredible admission for Jeremy to make, and it makes me certain that Jeremy has never wanted us to stay within the European Union. His record is clear. His record is absolutely clear. He's always been opposed to it. And he underwent a Damascene conversion. And I remember having a conversation with Jeremy's political secretary during the campaign in which I urged her to urge him to do more for the campaign. And her words to me were that Jeremy felt he's compromised enough already on Europe, i.e. he didn't want Labour to go into that contest arguing to stay in, because it was opposite to what he'd been arguing for the previous 30 years. I'm not even sure Jeremy did vote in the general in that. Well, I'd like to hear you say it, Jeremy, because I'm not certain.
I thought we had grown up and we weren't any longer going to use those kind of questions or those kind of remarks.
Well, I'd like to hear you say it. I would like to hear you confirm that you voted in.
Perfectly well what you and I were doing during the European referendum. What we're doing, we're speaking together on the same platform in Cardiff, asking people to vote to remain.
I was at that meeting, Jeremy, and you made a very narrow speech, as you did in all of those rallies. You only spoke about protecting workers' rights. You didn't make the big case we should have made. We're internationalists in Labour. We're internationalists, and we believe in collaboration and cooperation across Europe between peoples in this country and between peoples everywhere. I fundamentally want to see socialist solutions for everybody in Europe, and I want Labour to be making an argument as internationalists and cooperators at the heart of Europe. Jeremy doesn't agree with me about that.
After
and I say again, are you absolutely certain you did vote in?
At the end of that meeting in Cardiff, you didn't say any of that at all. You said something very different, actually. You said something extremely complimentary, and I said complimentary things to you. Can't we go back to that day?
How about going back to my question?
In fact, as I recall it, you were deputising for John McDonnell that evening.
Did he definitely vote in? Yeah, John didn't show up. I don't know what John was doing. He didn't show up.
He was not able to be there, and I think you know the reason why.
I don't actually. What was it?
It was a health issue.
No, well, he didn't tell me at that time.
Oh, well, I'm sure you would understand it then. Yeah. Okay. And you know perfectly well that straight after the referendum I went to a meeting of the Party of European Socialists. You know perfectly well that I'm the first Labour leader to consistently attend PES meetings over the past 6 months, because I want to build that progressive alliance across Europe that does oppose austerity, that does oppose the idea of a free market Europe. You know that perfectly well because you supported me in doing that.
I'm still wondering why you haven't answered my direct question as to whether you voted in or out.
Owen, you know perfectly well what the answer is, that I voted Remain, and I'm very surprised and actually quite disappointed that you should even raise this question. The only people that raised that question were actually the Daily Mail at the time.
That's a very what? I didn't catch that.